what are dragons? Why are they so terrifying? And more importantly, where did they come from? Howdy folks, my name is Sean, welcome back to Delver, and welcome to Dragon Week. Dragon Week is that special time of year where all of your favorite Dungeon Tube creators get together, go outside, touch grass, and get to talk about D&D's titular character himself. That's right, John Dragon. Link in the description. And to kick off such a momentous week, I have come here, yes, here of all places, where all of Dungeon Tubers film outside. Actually, Bob is right down the hill, hold on. Bob!
Because I'm Bob, this is where we learn how to This isn't my channel.
Dragons. Dragons vary wildly across pop culture, but they do have a lot of similarities. For example, a lot of them are reptilian. They have wings and they can fly. They breathe fire. But what about the fringe cases? For example... But does this count? This is Smaug from the 1977 animated Hobbit film. But he's got this, cat-like face and this chain smoker voice and...
But I don't remember smelling you before.
I think he sees me. Hold on. Oh, that's better. There is a long and storied history with dragons throughout fantasy, and especially in D&D. In fact, it's right there in the title. Where do these classic dragons come from? Let's go back to that first question that I asked. What makes them so terrifying? What is indicative of a dragon?
At its best, I think the modern dragon aesthetic and family in D&D is, in a word, apocalyptic.
Naturalistic.
I'd describe modern dragons as intimidating.
Dominating.
Fire-breathing monster that sits at the bottom of a mountain or something like that.
In a single word, it would have to be Welsh. Mostly because of their physical setup. They've got usually 4 legs, 2 wings.
It isn't uniform, and that's the biggest thing to take away from this. It's not all the same. However, I would argue that there is one dragon in particular that has a massive influence on modern day D&D dragons.
I would consider Smaug from The Hobbit to be the archetypal dragon. Massive horde, giant size, flaming breath. What more could you want?
The archetypal dragon is going to be different no matter where you are.
I would say is probably Smaug.
Definitely Smaug. I read Tolkien at an impressionable young age, and say what you will about those Hobbit movies, Benedict Cumberbatch was on point.
Smaug from The Hobbit. Smaug.
Has to be Smaug from The Hobbit.
Smaug is, without a shadow of a doubt, the dragon you think of when you think of this archetypal dragon. He is large, he is intimidating, he is sadistic, he sits on a hoard of gold over in a mountain, over top a village that he one day will destroy because of this perceived slight against him. Dragons in D&D are split between chromatic, which are evil, and metallic, which are good, with all of the other kinds kind of sprinkled in for flavor. Still, they all have hordes and intelligences that far exceed what you would see in maybe, Game of Thrones dragons that are a little bit more primal and animalistic. In the first iteration of D&D, there was this thing called Appendix N, which is all of the media that inspired Gary Gygax and the team when they were making the game. And of course, Lord of the Rings does appear in there. However, in later entries, Gygax would kind of, try to minimize the impact that it had, but it is very clear from the actions and behaviors of most dragons in D&D, especially in 2024, that they have this Smaug connection. However, I want to go further back. Yes, Smaug is the archetypal dragon of the modern day, but even he had very big inspirations, specifically from this old Icelandic myth called Sigurd the Volsung and its archetypal horde dragon, Fáfnir.
If I had to describe Fafnir's plight in one sentence, it would probably be that greed is a curse and pursuing material wealth over blood will get you nowhere. Except in Fafnir's case, it gets you turned into a dragon.
I know just a bit about Fafnir because I watched my wife play the 2018 God of War game.
I know next to nothing about Fáfnir from Sigurd the Volsung.
Fáfnir, I would say, is the first kind of archetypal dragon to get killed by a knight.
It wasn't until Sigurd and the Volsungs when we really get that fire-breathing, corrupted by greed and power kind of dragon, and that's with Fáfnir.
Of course, I know tons about Fáfnir and Sigurd of Volsung.
Fáfnir was this intimidating, terrifying dragon-like figure that was slain by Sigurd the Volsung toward the later half of the myth at the behest of his brother, and I want to be clear, the dragon's brother, Regan. You do hear that right. Fáfnir was not born a dragon. Fáfnir was a person who was corrupted by greed and eventually became a dragon as they laid atop their hoard that they had stolen, this hoard being called a weregild, I believe that's how you pronounce it, after he slew his adoptive father. I'm not going to explain all of the Sigurd the Volsung myth, and there's actually a really good reason for that. See, back when I first started attending community college many years ago, I think probably a decade now, I took a class on mythology and legends, and I was given Sigurd the Volsung for this huge project that we had to do at the end of the semester. I'm gonna be honest, I was new to college, I wasn't great at it, I didn't even buy the book for the class. So the night before this assignment is due, I'm scrambling to create this whole presentation on a book I've never read or a legend I've never heard of, and I got it done. I used PDF articles, I used Wikipedia entries and all of the reference lists. I got it finished. So I go in the next day, I give this massive presentation, I tell them all about Sigurd the Volsung, I sit down, and my professor looks me in the eye and says, "Hey Sean, that's not the right one. You didn't buy the book. You didn't read the material." The professor was really awesome, and the presentation apparently was so great that he allowed me to pass anyway. So Dr. Jared Aragona at Scottsdale Community College, if you're seeing this video, I just want you to know, a few years ago, I made a tweet that you kind of looked and sounded like Tom Hanks. The Jimmy Kimmel Show reached out to me thinking that it was me, and I had to tell them, no, it's actually my old professor. So they asked for your contact information because they wanted you to appear on the show. So if that came to fruition, we're even. In the myth of Sigurd the Volsung, Sigurd is instructed to slay Fáfnir. However, Fáfnir is a very powerful dragon and very armored on the outside, except for the underside. So Sigurd is basically instructed to dig a hole, sit in it, and then when Fáfnir slithers over top, take his sword and thrust it up, slaying the monster.
But there was the ancient Fáfnir, and the face of terror lay on the huddled folds of the serpent that were black and ashen gray. In the desert lit by the sun, and those twain looked each on each, and the forth from the face of terror went a sound of dreadful speech.
"Child, child, who art thou that hast smitten? Bright child, of whence is thy birth?"
Now, you might start to see a similarity emerging. In The Hobbit, when Bilbo is interacting with Smaug, it is a very tense and deadly conversation where Smaug is actively trying to hunt for Bilbo, and Bilbo is trying to outsmart this incredibly intelligent foe. But similar to The Hobbit, Fáfnir is slain, but they do give us a few moments to savor it and have this really tense discussion similar to Bilbo and Smaug between Fáfnir and Sigurd.
"What then shall endure, O Fáfnir? The tale of the battle to tell?"
"I am blind, O strong compeller, in the bonds of death and hell. But thee shall the rattling gold and the red rings bring unto pain.
Yet the rings my hand shall shatter, and the earth shall gather again."
Woe! Woe! In the days past over I bore the helm of dread. I reared the face of terror and the hoarded hate of the dead. I overcame and was mighty. I was wise and cherished my heart. In the waste where no man wandered, and the high house builded apart. Till I met thine hand, O Sigurd, and thy might ordained from of old. And I fought and fell in the morning, and I die far off from the gold.
Then Sigurd leaned on his sword, and a dreadful voice went by, like the wail of a god departing, and the war god's misery. And the strong words of ancient wisdom went by on the desert wind, and the words that mar and fashion, the words that loose and bind, and sounds of a strange lamenting, and such a strange things bewailed, that words to tell their meaning, the tongue of man hath failed.
Also, big thank you to Davi from MysticArts DM for providing the accurate pronunciations and voice for Sigurd the Volsung. He absolutely killed it, literally. Now look, the classic depiction of Fáfnir is not the only influence that was used on Smaug or of course modern day dragons, but it is very clear, even by Tolkien's own admission, that Fáfnir did have a huge role to play in the greed being such a pervasive theme with his dragons. I desire dragons with a profound desire. Of course, I and my timid body did not wish to have them in the neighborhood. but the world that contained even the imagination of Fáfnir was richer and more beautiful, at whatever cost of peril. This depiction of greed in dragons was very important to Tolkien, and it made its way into Dungeons & Dragons as well. I mean, especially in the 2024 dragons. I mean, take a look at this. Red dragons make their lairs amid perilous cliffs and volcanoes. Within, they amass and fiercely protect hoards of treasure, and many have perfect recall of the hoard's contents and the locations of all they've collected. Hello, yes, is this A&E's Hoarders from the mid-2010s? I'd like to report someone. That was a little joke for the A&E crowd, which, surprisingly, is a very small percentage of my viewers on YouTube. Get me to God's country. The tale of Fáfnir is an old one, and I'll be honest, it is not very up to our standards of modern fantasy. Sigurd the Volsung across the board is just classic myth. However, I think that it is still important to read, and it is completely free online, check the description, but it's awesome to pay homage to these titans that actually influenced what we believe and what we have themes for in the modern day. Thank you guys again for listening to my rambling. Enjoy the rest of Dragon Week, and I will see you guys next time.